Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's that time of the week again where Alex and I sit down and beam directly into your brains with another episode of the A Winner Is You podcasts. For new listeners, we are your friendly neighbourhood video game book club podcast, and I feel like I say this every week, but we have a very special episode for you as we round out our second annual Summer of Resi. That's right, folks. This week we are coming to you to discuss all things OG Resident Evil all the way back in 1996. Before we do all that, it's time for the usual introductions before we begin, so you can match the voice to a name. My name is David, and with me as ever is AWIY co-member, Mr. Alex Aldridge. How are you doing today, Alex? Other than your toilet escapades, which I've been hearing all about.
Well, I'm good. I'm good. Fresh off the back of
The toilet seat?
AEW All In. I nearly said AWIY All In. That would be quite the event. No, AEW All In at Wembley Stadium.
So I asked you earlier this week to give me the old man, non-smart rundown of what this is, and you said the closest equivalent is perhaps SummerSlam in the AEW calendar. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've long tried to figure out what their WrestleMania is, but I don't know if they've really clearly defined what it is either.
Surely they have to have one, because that is such a moneymaker for WWE. Feels like they're leaving money on the table just for getting eyes on the product.
Yeah, potentially this becomes it from now on, but I think there were some issues people were having that the card for the event was not of a WrestleMania style event standard.
In what way? Just the quality, the booking?
Well, both. Chiefly, people were not happy that Kenny Omega did not have a singles match. He was in a 6-man tag.
Okay.
Which many people were not. You know, it just felt like it was kind of like a waste of his talent to have him in the biggest event he's going to ever be in, not wrestling. The Kenny Omega match, you know, the 5-star classic. He was in a very enjoyable match.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of like multi-man matches, probably so they could like just get people on the card and give them a payday and get them to go to the event for like a nice thing for everybody. So maybe there was an element of, you know, you're just trying to fit everybody in, because there was only one women's match and it was a 4-way and it lasted like 10, 20 minutes.
Okay.
And that was it. So again, you know, there were questionable booking things there, but the MJF Adam Cole stuff was exemplary. It was like perfect wrestling. It was so good. The crowd was eating it up, me included.
Is what you saw what people at home would have saw on TV, or do you get like, is the TV like an edited version?
No, it was like we kept saying that we needed to go get like more drink. I especially needed to go get more drink because I booed myself hoarse when CM Punk came out first. Had I known what he'd just done before he walked out, because he'd got in a fight with somebody.
Did he?
This guy Jack Perry, who's the son of Luke Perry from 90210, whatever it was.
Perry Saturn.
Yeah, also him. They had like a baby together.
Yeah, good.
And the mop was involved somehow too. So apparently Jack Perry wanted to use some real glass in a bit from a few weeks ago that I don't remember what even happened in it. But CM Punk said no, he wasn't allowed to do it because CM Punk's the boss, apparently. So they had in this match that Jack Perry had, he came out in a limo and then he got suplexed through the windscreen of the limo, and he looked into the camera and said something like, "That's real glass, cry me a river," or something. And then apparently as he was walking to the back, CM Punk asked if they had a problem, and then apparently CM Punk got him in a headlock and then had to go out for his match. So I'm glad I booed him as loud as possible, but not for the resulting hoarseness that I felt for the entire night.
Is that
I barely sing Chris Jericho's theme music properly. I was gutted.
Is that the reaction CM Punk gets these days, or is he still a big face?
No, he gets... I don't know what the percentage is, the ratio of boos to cheers, but it felt like there were quite a few boos going on.
He's not done the full John Cena flip.
Well, no, and I think Cena's problem was that people didn't like his character and were kind of bored, whereas CM Punk, I feel like if you're not booing him, you're just advocating that it's okay for him to be an arsehole to everybody.
Yeah.
Like, he's the common denominator in everything that AEW seems to have issues going on at the moment. And
it's one of those people that problems follow.
His mate bit Kenny Omega for some reason. I don't get any of it. So I was, we're all me and my friends were all very much Young Bucks AEW original fans versus not, not liking CM Punk whatsoever.
Hmm.
He won, obviously. So there was that. And it also took us 3 hours to get home, which was shit. But the event itself was excellent. It's on again next year. They
Or is
announced that they're
it?
doing
So
it again.
you're going back?
There is no question that we'll be going back. And hopefully next year they'll kind of see it more as like, rather than this crazy one-off spectacle where we need to get everybody involved, they'll actually build to it properly and have a proper card with like a really stellar high like marquee. I mean, MJF Adam Cole was a marquee match and they built to it really well, but I think there's a lot of people that, like I say, just were a bit too many gimmicky matches and silly matches going on that it kind of felt a little bit house show, as some people would want to say. And they've got a pay-per-view on Sunday as well. He's like,
That's a lot of pay-per-views.
He's because they don't even do that many pay-per-views in a year, but he's committed apparently to having a pay-per-view in Chicago at the same time every year, and this was apparently the only time they could get Wembley, so they kind of had no choice but to do what they did. But it was weird because, like, at the beginning, before the event started in the 0 hour stuff, they had like a setup for a match the week after. It's kind of like you're in front of 80,000 people and you're building up to a match in front of 8,000 people in a week's time. Like, what are you doing? How are you happy doing this? You must be gutted. You basically just come out here because you're on the shittier pig.
That's amazing that a wrestling, like, this is probably the first time since WCW that there's been a wrestling company, is that the right word, that would sell that many tickets that isn't WWE.
Definitely.
There must be a pretty, because like I'm trying to think of like not being a mad wrestling fan. I'm trying to think of like the companies. TNA was one that seemed to appear. Does that still a thing?
That's called Impact Wrestling now, but it is still a thing. It's just it's never cracked. Like it's always had good viewing numbers apparently from like outside of the States.
Right. Okay.
So they've had like good international viewing numbers, which is obviously always impressive to get good viewing numbers for something like that in an era of streaming and pirating and whatever. But they'd never be able to put on an event like this. The primary reason is just because Tony Khan's dad is so rich. He can buy anything he wants. He can do anything he wants. The fact that they got Wembley sold out, not sold out, but they've sold 81,000 tickets is very, very impressive.
Yeah.
But it just shows like how starved British people are for that level of wrestling coming over here.
I think also
see American wrestling like twice a year.
Never
if in AEW's case.
Sort of adult wrestling fans are until this AEW came along, they're pretty starved just for proper good wrestling content as well, because WWE's been bad for a long time, right?
Yeah, I barely saw any children at AEW at all. It was all people who look like a less washed version of me. Which is,
I guess that's got to be a good thing though, because it means there's a market.
You're in the right
for
place,
someone like you. Yeah.
I'm amongst people of a similar age and mindset, rather than seeing loads of kids with John Cena shirts or whatever. This is, for me, proper.
Yeah, I guess there's like I don't know. Maybe I see similarities in that. Like when I was younger, and we were into video games, there weren't many, if any, big video game nerds of our age that we are now. So like, it's nice to see that now we are that age. There's still a market for us, and they still do make games for someone of our age, because there's enough of us to obviously make it a viable business. I guess it's a similar idea, right? And like wrestling fans have sort of aged up, and there's a product now providing for them, because WWE hasn't been that product in a long time, really, has it? Since the 90s. Really.
Yeah, exactly. And it's being, AEW is primarily being run and marketed by people who are our age and grew up watching what we watched and want to deliver a product that we would want, rather than whatever WWE.
And do you think
Saudi?
Do you think WWE sort of has its market and it will always be like that? Or because like I'm trying to think, like last time WWE got really good, obviously, was the Attitude Era, and that was as a result of competition from WCW. So now they've got a legitimate competitor in the arena, or the wrestling arena. Do you think they get better, or are they so big now they're sort of happy to operate in the area that they have? You know, like
From an
sort of the,
outside
the
perspective,
Nintendo of.
yeah, it kind of seems like they're from an outside perspective, that's where they're at. Is that they are
Because are their viewing figures
well,
still good?
apparently, yeah. Apparently, their live show figures are really good. They've got an event coming up in the UK. They sold like 45,000 tickets in a day or something. So that I believe was some kind of record. So I think when Vince McMahon had to go away for his sexual assault stuff, it seemed as if Triple H and the new sort of creative ownership of the company were trying to make it different. But it does seem like since Vince has come back that it has regressed into his preferences again. So that company has to change at some point when when he dies, but or gets arrested and put in jail or whatever is going to be his ending. But I think as long as he's around, it is going to stick with what he wants and what he says goes, and it's not always what fans are after.
I'm interested.
AEW is probably too much the other way though. They're a little bit too reactive to fans.
Yeah.
They're too trying to be like too on the pulse with it. So that if anything gets a negative reaction or something, they'll immediately try and like change it up. It's a bit too reactive. They don't necessarily stick with things as rigidly as WWE would if they believe in it.
I'm quite surprised, and I fully admit, like, this is going on a podcast, so I will freely admit that this could be my sort of cultural ignorance more than anything else. But I'm quite surprised a society like the Saudis would want to invest in wrestling. I mean, it's violent, lots of women not wearing very many clothes.
Well, remember, they weren't allowed out there the first couple of times.
Yeah, it seems like something I'm not sure. I guess perhaps that's why it is a bit more sanitized these days. And also because they were wanting to... Vince McMahon's wife was wanting to be a politician for a while, wasn't it? So they were sort of trying to clean up their act.
That's exactly what he was trying to do, yeah. And I guess they maintained that for advertising and now I guess, to appease these other nations. Although, I mean, Saudis... Yeah, it'd be a bit odd for them to dislike violence, but I guess that's kind of like how we used to feel when Germany was the most sensitive to video game censorship, right? It's kind of like,
I'm just trying to think of like, so it's a heavily
really work.
Conservative religious society, isn't it? And yeah, in my mind, wrestling doesn't marry up with that. But again, that's maybe me wrong. I'm probably obviously totally wrong because they have invested.
Yeah, I
like
mean,
sports I can see sports. That makes sense. It's a clean.
Yeah.
Like think of even like the drinking culture. I mean, it's not so much anymore. It's cleaned up a lot, but like the traditional drinking and drugs culture that was operating around wrestling as well, it just doesn't seem to marry up with.
That's a really good point.
The
yeah,
at all to me.
Seems like it's all down to Sergeant Slaughter putting in the work in the early '90s when he became that Saudi sympathizer gimmick. He paved the way. He was a pioneer.
He's done it. They were playing the long game. They could see it coming.
Thanks, Sarge.
I wonder how Resident Evil sells in Saudi Arabia. Do you think it sells well? Probably not.
I'd be fascinated to see any type of video game numbers for Saudi Arabia. I don't know what the culture is like that at all.
There'll certainly be censorship in it. I know because I've spent a lot of time in Dubai. So if you go to the cinema in Dubai and there's a kissing scene, for example, they'll just cut it straight out.
Really?
Yeah, they'll just hack it out and show you the movie without it in there.
Hack it out like a journalist's art.
So I'd imagine, like, so I'm playing Baldur's Gate 3 at the moment. None of those sloppy, awkward, makes you squirm inside your stomach because they're so cheesy sex scenes are going to be in that game. Maybe that game's not allowed out there, or you just use a VPN, I guess.
Probably.
Then you can get it.
Do you reckon they'd even let you see the scene at the end of Resident Evil where Chris holds Jill's hand on the helicopter? Do you reckon that's getting cut out?
Maybe that would be allowed.
Yeah.
There's nothing in this game really that I think they would maybe be cutting out.
Well, apart from the introduction, which is cut out for everybody but the Japanese. Did
Yeah.
you see that in the end?
Yeah, I think it was not in the. So I think I got that version right. Did I? Yeah.
Yeah. So if you rewatch that again when you restarted the game with all the fancy graphics, you should have seen the whole.
Oh. Then no,
scene.
I didn't. No, I didn't.
You probably cut past it.
Yeah, I did because I started a new game as Chris, and then after finishing it as Jill, and then.
Well, you started on the PlayStation, like emulating the PlayStation version, which would have been at least an American version, which would have had that cut out. Then when you started playing it, the Japanese version, you probably skipped it both times, so you missed out on all the graphic violence.
What an idiot! What an idiot!
Well, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. By next episode, David will have watched it and he can give us an updated opinion on it before we kick off whatever game we're doing. Oh, I know what game we're doing next. We'll tell you later.
Well, and I also started. I downloaded the audiobook of Itchy Tasty and thought I can listen to this while I'm commuting. That'll be a fun thing to listen to. So I've started listening to that. Which that'll be fun. Sorry?
Anybody decent reading it, or is it the guy himself?
Didn't recognise anyone. Couldn't tell you, if I'm honest. I would have to go and look it up. Let's do it, in fact. We're on a podcast. Let's have a quick look.
Yeah. While you do that,
a quick look.
Just for the video audience, I recently did another trade-in. Sent some stuff off to CEX in order to spend some more money.
Oh, yes.
Well, some more voucher. And the game I ordered, I was really excited to get it back, and I got a package that looked blatantly like it was coming from CEX the other day, and it was them sending back one of the games that they'd refused.
Oh.
A game I'd never actually put in my console, but I did not buy new, so they said it was scratched. It was like a Ratchet and Clank PS3 game that I just thought I'm never going to play.
They sent it back?
Yeah. I was only like £3. But anyway, it's slightly related to this podcast that we're doing. Would you like to do a guess of what I've got? It's not Resident Evil, but it is a sort of adjacent.
So is it survival horror?
Yes.
Okay, so before we do this, it is a lady called Cindy Kay.
Oh, a lady, okay.
Is narrating it, and she has done other books such as Awakening Fertility, some book called The Hate Vow, which is in the Quicksilver series and has a man with no top on the cover. So yeah, no one famous was the answer to that.
Bit of a career switch.
Yeah, that is a move from softcore housewife porn to Resident Evil.
And fertility books, yeah.
And fertility books. Right, so you've gone survival horror.
Yeah. And what's annoying is that I actually did own this before and got rid of it, and now decided I wanted it again.
Is it a disc or is it a cartridge? Yeah. It's a disc. Is it a Sony disc?
No.
Microsoft?
Yes.
It's a disc. It's Microsoft era. OG Xbox? You've been going to buy those again recently. It is.
Yep.
Publisher? Bethesda? No. I was trying to think of that one game, years and years ago, I played at your mum's house. It was Bethesda horror game.
Yes. Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah.
Dark Corners of the Earth. Yeah, I've still got that one. I never got rid of that in the end.
Japanese publisher.
Yeah.
So
this is a really obvious game.
It's a Silent Hill then, is it?
Yeah.
Which one? And OG Xbox, did you say?
There's only 2 of them on the OG Xbox, and I've got the other one.
2 and 3?
2 and 4.
2 and 4.
I don't know why 3's not on there.
Weird.
Yes.
Well, let's go with what you get. Oh, look at that. That's a cool box as well. It goes well with the green.
Silent Hill. The best quality game I've got from CEX in a very long time. Really.
Yeah, that's good.
Like no scuffs, no scratches. £35 though.
Sure.
Well, for me it wasn't, because it's just a bunch of games that I got rid of.
Yeah.
But I've wanted to play Silent Hill 2 again, and I don't want to play the HD version because it's a disgrace, and it's not even the same voice actors or anything. I think it's Troy Baker on that one.
Did they remaster it in quotation marks?
Yeah. So they changed. I believe they may have even changed the script, but they definitely changed the voice acting, and then obviously it had all those bugs and issues with it that they barely fixed, and they didn't fix on Xbox 360, but did on PS3. It's just So I wanted the original version, and I wanted this like Xbox updated version of it. Brand new bonus scenario, never seen before, and Control Maria, new areas, weapons, and items. Enhanced graphics and lighting effects. Hey,
we're gonna have to play Silent Hill 2 at some point for the podcast then.
I think we should do all 3. It's 2, 3, and 4. I think we should do all of them at some point.
Yeah.
September of Silent. No.
Silent September, and all the podcasts that we just put the title up, and we just don't speak on the podcast. It's just silent. We just sit in front of the TV and play it. Yeah.
And people have to try and guess what's going on.
Yeah. I watched Let's Play on Giant Bomb before I threw in the towel on that website of the first Silent Hill, and I was quite shocked on how it didn't look like I would have a good time with it.
No, it doesn't, does it?
No.
I've got it and it's not fun.
No. Kind of like to the point that I'm not even sure how that would have been considered good back in the PS1 era. Bad. Unlike this game. Oh, that's a Google face.
It is a Google face. Silent Hill for PlayStation on Metacritic, 86.
See, that's a good game. What year did it come out? Is it riding the
99?
So it's not kind of.
Did we not say that I think we said it in one of our podcasts recently that it was it coming out was part of the reason that they messed around with their ordering and what Resident Evil 3 was, didn't they? Because that came out in 99 and they were worried that they were going to get outdone by this. So they had to sort of rethink what they were doing. But I heard somebody talking about Silent Hill 4 The Room the other day, and I know that hasn't really got a lot of sort of crazy praise. You know, the PS2 and Xbox One's got 76. But the premise of it does actually sound very interesting. So I'm excited for us to give that a try at some point.
It's Silent Hill. I've played Silent Hill 2, obviously, but other than that, I've not really poked at that series too much. I don't think.
I've never played 3 or 4. I've only ever played 2 and 1.
I've played like little bits of a lot of them, but never to the point that I could give you an opinion on them in any way. So yes, watch out for those.
Rectified.
Well, exactly. Watch out for these games coming soon. Will we dive into Resident Evil 1996, Alex?
Yes, which I can safely say is the 7th best Resident Evil game we've ever covered on this podcast.
We can. I keep calling it. I've been trying to think about how to refer to this game, and I keep calling it Resident Evil 96 because I don't know why, but I really don't like it when people say Resident Evil 1 or like Halo 1, because it's not Halo 1, it's just Halo.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to think of
with you there, and I don't like having to say that either. That's absolutely fair, and I've been agonising about what to call the podcast as well, because I think I'm going to have to put Resident Evil brackets 1996, or am I? Do we just call the next one Resident Evil Remake?
Yeah, maybe, because maybe that's what it is, and then you get Resident Evil Remaster and Remake. Director's cuts. There's a lot of releases of these games. Anyway.
Especially this one.
Yeah. Well, let's get to it. As many of you will know, Resident Evil was first released in Japan on the 22nd of March 1996 before making its way to North America on the 30th of March, and then later that year on the 1st of August into PAL territories. If I knew this before, Alex, I've actually since forgotten it, and I have since forgotten it to the point that I maybe don't quite trust it, and you'll be able to verify this, but apparently my research suggests that Resident Evil was originally conceived by the game's producer Tokuro Fujiwara as a remake to the 1989 horror game Sweet Home. Does that information sound correct?
Yes.
Good. Before we eventually became...
Which is what we touched on before, saying about the point and click feel of this game, because that's what Sweet Home is.
I think I've actually got that written in my notes already, because it just keeps jumping out in my head, like even like walking around the sort of static environments with the 3D models, there's like angles, it just looks like a point and click game.
Side note, in the typical David fashion, there's a rabbit hole available if you'd like to jump down it. I would quite like to have us both watch Sweet Home and have a chat about it.
The Netflix show.
Oh, well, I meant the original Japanese movie.
Yeah, I'd be keen for that. No, I think that's probably a better idea, because I don't even know. I think I've started watching Sweet Home, but I don't know if it's got anything to do with the IP, or if it's just something new.
I'd be keen for that.
That would be fun.
But yeah, I'd be interested to have a little chat about what we feel about the influence to all of this.
I've often thought that would be quite fun if we've been playing a game that has got like a TV adaptation, like a movie or a show, to sort of tie that in to some sort of theme that we're doing. But yeah, I've never actually got to suggesting that. So
Patreon bonus episodes, isn't it, when people actually start listening? into this.
Yeah, exactly. We can go through, because think of all the Resident Evil movies and books and TV
I had
shows.
that thought go in my head the other day. I was like, oh, we should, when we run out of games for Summer of Resi, we'll have to do the films. And then I had to hit myself. What are you doing to yourself, you idiot? You don't want to do that. Might as well play a fucking Pokemon game.
Oh, good lord. It's going to happen one day. I know I'm going to do it, Alex. I'm going to do it, and then I'm going to regret it as soon as I do it.
Yeah, it's going to have to be fire red or leaf green. I won't accept anything different.
Okay. Before this title eventually became the Resident Evil that we know and love today, it started off in 1993 as a Super Nintendo game, before becoming a fully 3D first-person shooter around 1994, and then finally the static camera third-person game that the first few games in the series became known for. To date, I had a look, and there's Alex, I'm probably going to miss a few of these out, but we're talking purely Resident Evil 1.0 without the remakes and remasters. There's a few versions of this game. There's the PS1 release that came out in 1996. There was a PS1 Director's Cut which came out in 1997. The PC version, which I think is the one I played, came out in 1997. There's a Sega Saturn version which also came out in 1997, and then there's the Nintendo DS version which I believe you played, that came out in 2006. And then I've got
the director's cut DualShock version that I showed everybody last week.
Yes, I think I don't know if I said this in a podcast before. I surely have. There was a rumor going around my school when the DualShock became a thing that it was a controller that gave you an electric shock, and I could not understand. Yeah, two shocks. My child brain could not for the life of me understand why someone would want to willingly buy a controller that gave you an electric shock.
Have you ever sat on one of those machines? When you go to like a theme park and stuff, like
no, too scared of them.
There's like where you hold on to the electric.
So I used to have a
electrocutes you in the seat.
I don't know why. I don't know why, but I used to own this game, and you always used to hold a little. It was like a handheld thing that had like little metal bits on where the hand was. It had a red button on the top, and then it would all be connected to this box in the middle, and there'd be a red flashing light on it. And me and my friends used to always be desperate to play it before we went out on a night out. And what it would do is it would be this flashing red light, and it would be like beep, 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 and then the red light would flash green. And as soon as the red light flashed green, you had to push the button, and the last person to push the button would get an electric shock. That's the closest I ever did. I hated that thing. It still terrifies me to this day.
Is it called Lightning Reaction Extreme?
Let me have a look. Yeah, it's exactly that. What a horrible device that was.
Yeah.
It genuinely hurt as well.
There's a weird fascination for dudes doing stupid shit like that. Like, I remember a mate of mine always used to be like, oh, have you ever licked a battery? It's really funny. What? No. But he did. He showed me it. He licked the battery. I was like, ugh, horrible. Do you want to do it?
No, I don't know. Why would I?
I might as well go stand on a plug.
Let's wrestle this podcast back on topic, though.
Sorry.
Alex, let's kick things off with some general thoughts. How do you feel about the game? Standout moments, for better or worse? Was it better or worse than you were expecting? I suppose it's also worth talking about how we played this game. As you said, you played the DS version. So they've got a bit of context and sort of how you felt about that version as well, because you've played other versions in the past, I assume.
Yes, I have. Although primarily I've only ever played the PlayStation version. I had never played the PC version that you dove into. Definitely enjoyed it more than I expected to. Obviously, I've played it quite a lot in my life, but not for at least 10 years, I would have said. And probably the first time I ever played it without my friend Chris, who always used to talk me through these games forevermore. And yeah, I think it actually holds up really well, depending on what version you play. I think playing the original PlayStation version definitely felt slow. When I played it on the PS5, the director's cut they've got on there, which is just the PS1 version sort of ported, that felt incredibly slow, even like especially compared to Resident Evil 3, which, as we agree, is like a really sort of fast-paced, action-packed version of this, which is why we ranked it higher in our last episode. But when I switched over to the DS version, game changer. It just felt so much slicker, felt so much more user friendly with having the quick turn in there and the touch screen having the map on it, being able to combine stuff in your inventory using the stylus or the touch screen, so I could combine like weapons and guns and all that kind of stuff. Tactical reload, you can skip the door opening, loading screens, and it also has quite a lot of additional gameplay stuff in it that I will get into a bit later. But we've had it said on this podcast before by KDB that it was like the optimum way to play Resident Evil 1, and he's absolutely right. It's an unbelievably good version of the game, which got unfairly shit on when it came out because it came out close to a period of time where, I think it came out after Resident Evil 4 had already come out.
Okay.
So the series had long left that type of Resident Evil in the past, and I guess people were just disappointed that this was what was coming instead of something new. But as time has gone on, and if people are looking for a way to play Resident Evil 1 and can get hold of it, I believe it's quite sought after, and you'd have to buy a DS or a 3DS. This is a really, really great way to play it. Looks really good. Like to see, I know it's a DS which came out way after the PS1. We're talking pretty much 10 years on from it. For it to look as close to the original PS1 game that's on a disc on a tiny little DS cart, and have all the the sounds in there and stuff, heavily compressed, of course, but really impressive piece of work.
Obviously, if you played it on, did you play it on your 3DS?
Yes.
That's not so much of an issue, but I was also thinking when you were talking there, if it coming out on 3DS, it's a great platform for it as well, because in 2006 that would have been the time before the nubbin, so like you only had the one sort of movement input.
Well, this is DS, remember, so I don't even know if it had.
I thought like end of life DSs had a wee nubbin on it. Depends what. There was a Metal Gear came out. That was Gear game that came out, and that was either on the 3DS or the DS, and that was sort of the first wave. But then you must be right, because the 3DS didn't launch with a nubbin, which makes me think it
3DS launched with one analog stick on the left, but the DS I don't think ever had
one. So I guess
I was playing it with the D-pad anyway, even though I have both those left and right analog sticks on my 3DS. I was playing it with the D-pad.
The fixed camera angles then probably do work quite well for this type of game.
Yeah, totally.
Which is great, and it looks fine. Because as you've been speaking about it, I've been trying to remember the quality of the 3DS screen, and I can't really. I can remember the bottom screen always looked quite washed out, but
doesn't it?
The top one is much better, is it? I can't remember it at all, if I'm honest.
Which was I actually found a shame that all the cutscenes are shown on the bottom screen, which I found weird, because as you say that it's better quality image on the top screen because that is just a screen, whereas the bottom one is the sort of squishy, touchy one. So,
and how did they tie in
smudged up with your hands and stuff?
How did they tie in the touchscreen stuff?
It drastically changes it. For example, the biggest change to the fundamental gameplay is like you'll have these random events where it goes first person, and zombies just come at you, and all you've got is a knife, and you have to swipe on the screen to like attack stuff, including like hunters and dogs and stuff. The dogs are a pain in the dick. I couldn't get the timing right for them when they jump at you to try and swipe them away.
I'm going to have to look that up. That is really different in a way I was not expecting.
In fact, even sometimes there was crows on there and stuff, but it also has loads of touchscreen puzzles that are totally different. So for an example of one, or several actually, the dining room where you put the gold emblem in. So you take the emblem, go swap it over with the gold one, put it in, and the clock moves out the way.
That's right.
There was a puzzle element to that on the DS where you had to actually like move the hands of the clock with the stylus to make it to a specific time before it would actually open the thing. What else? Richard, who is dying from the snake bite.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
I had to give him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation by blowing into the microphone on the DS. I fucking hated it. I actually thought I was going to like pass out because I couldn't do the breath long enough. I think the microphone sensitivity wasn't high enough.
Maybe you got some dirt in there.
I ran out of the blow. I blew as long as I possibly could, and I had no breath left.
Ran out of the blow.
I failed it. but you give him mouth to mouth, and then you save him, and he's like, "Oh, go set the dining room clock to 8:12," and then you get some shotgun shells out of it. It was really weird. There's a room where the room with the moose head in it, where you had to like turn the light off.
And you get this where you get the Magnum, right?
Yeah, I had to blow the candles out in that room with the DS microphone again. There's one puzzle where you have to like spin a record on a record player with the touch screen. There was, and in every save room, pretty much, there's like a blue box, and it's got like a puzzle that you do on it. And after you do these puzzles, you get like extra items.
Oh, cool!
Free stuff. So
I quite like that.
I think you'd enjoy it. Yeah, the first person stuff with the knife swiping really got to me at the end because it was doing it in rooms I'd been through like 3 or 4 times, and it's interrupting backtracking for the same shit. Now, sometimes it did give you an item. So if you kill up all the zombies that are coming after you, sometimes it would drop like handgun bullets or herbs. But it became quite tiresome towards the end. I just wanted to like get moving. So when I played my Chris playthrough, I just did it as the classic mode, rather than this rebirth mode, is what they call it for the touchscreen stuff. And yeah, although the puzzles and stuff in the rebirth mode are excellent and way better than the lack of them in the original game. Like, you know, the one where you lower the water to get the sharks all fucked up. When you do that on the rebirth mode, like then a poisonous gas starts coming out of the room, and you have to quickly run over and like turn this valve with the touchscreen to not die.
By poisonous gas in this game.
Yeah.
And it would be like,
all you need is a box.
Yeah, well, I'd like anticipate it. I'd be like, gas. Anticipate it, cover up where the gas was going to come out, and I'd leave like a little tiny little square, and it would still kill me. And I'd be like, why? So annoying. But I was pleasantly surprised by this game as well. My sort of takeaway points with it were largely positive. I was expecting it to be totally fine, and I was actually glad that we've sort of spent, obviously on and off, mainly off, the last 2 years sort of digging into Resident Evil as a franchise on this podcast, because it sort of had primed my brain for the tank controls that I thought were going to be a real barrier for me. I think I've since retracted it on podcasts as well, but I was also concerned in the run up to this game that the puzzles were going to annoy me, because in my head they were quite obtuse. They were very point and click, but actually when I played it, they were fairly intuitive. There wasn't really many points where I just had no idea what I was supposed to be doing. So I'm not sure what gave me that opinion back in the day.
I think it might be the remake, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Which would have been one of the first old school Resident Evil games you've played. You probably played like 5 or whatever.
It would have been.
You went back and got the remake on the
Xbox One.
Yeah, and I think that was probably a bit of a culture shock in terms of how different it was to what you'd just done. Because we did a podcast about that with Chris ages ago, and we talked about how stupid the puzzles were on that, and I remember you saying that at the time. So I think it is that got this in your head.
Right, okay. Because I
I'll be
largely
interested to see
enjoyed
how
it.
you feel about them next time when we actually come back and play that with this in your recent memory.
Yeah. The version I played, like I say, I think it was PC version, and I had an HD pack installed to make it look good, and it looked pretty good. I didn't ever manage to get the seamless HD pack installed that we spoke about, but
it doesn't seem as needed as it did for the other ones.
No, it looked great.
Seems to be sort of like an additional bit to an XG patch that already exists.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I thought it looked pretty good. There were certain moments where, and I think it's just the nature of the age of the game, plus the HD packs, to be honest with you. I didn't think that the characters quite fit with the environments, and they looked like they were sort of skating over 2D environments rather than
the most noticeable one for sure. Yeah. I agree with that.
But for the most part, it was great. I enjoy looking at a lot of the static environments, and I think there's certain ones that would make a great picture for the wall, I often think. But yeah, I did enjoy it. It was great fun. And the addition of the quick turn, because I don't know what I think I've finally cracked it, Alex. I've started using quick turns in Resident Evil games, and I'm not sure. Like, running away from some of the hunters and stuff would have been so much worse if you had no quick turn.
And no auto aim would be even worse.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of, like, from a modern perspective, if you can get over the controls. From a modern perspective, the only real drawback I can think of in terms of things that might hold you back and sort of mar the experience slightly is I didn't think the map was particularly good. In the version I played, it would show you what room you were in, which was at least helpful. But that was about it. I frequently got turned
There was no dedicated
around.
map button either.
Yeah.
You have to go into your inventory and then select the map and then select the floor you want.
The other thing
But
that
I was finding all sorts of problems with that. When I switched to the DS version, which has a little yellow dot on the map, which is constantly displayed on the top screen, and as you move, it moves where you are in the room. Night and day. So much easier to get around. But this is the worst map, I think, in Resident Evil.
Yeah.
All of them.
It's one thing. It's also made me realise, we studied it at uni very, very briefly, but is it the 180-degree rule? In that
like the Y,
you should never cross like
the Y-axis or whatever. Not the Y-axis. But
switch around. Like I was finding that there was aspects in which you would have the camera facing your character one way, and you bring up the map, and the map would be mirrored. And the bit that's jumping to mind is when you go to the top of the stairs in the main hallway.
Yeah.
So you'd open the map, it would be the opposite way around from what the camera shows you, and that confused the life out of me for the entirety of the game, to the point that I was predicting that I was confused, trying to anticipate the confusion, but anticipating it wrongly.
Like playing Football Manager and you're like the away team, so you're at the top of the screen and your left back has to go on the right-hand side.
Yeah. Constantly, you've probably seen it when I play Football Manager and I write out my squad. My right back is always on the left-hand side of my sheet. Don't know why. But anyway, I guess we can move on to the... Where have I... Yeah, so as we all know, Resident Evil is a third-person survival horror game in which the player controls either Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine. Alex was an absolute trooper and he did 2 playthroughs. I messed about a bit with Chris Redfield, but did my playthrough primarily as Jill, both of them are 2 members of a special forces group called STARS, which stands for Special Tactics and Rescue Group. The game begins as players respond to a previous STARS team who have gone missing after being sent to investigate a series of disappearances, creature sightings and murders. They're sent to a mansion on the outskirts of Raccoon City to investigate. The game is presented, as was spoken about, in real-time 3D superimposed on pre-rendered backgrounds, which I think, and maybe I am placing my opinion on you, but I think we both agree that it actually looks pretty good. And it allowed you to get more bang for your buck. Was that? I mean, you'll probably know this more than I, but my memory of this is this allowed them to make the game look better than sort of other games on the platform because of this sort of pre-rendered environment, so there was no moving parts other than the character on screen, really, so it allowed them to make things look really, really nice. And I think that even in
it's less intensive on the memory as well, because it's just a static.
It's a JPEG, isn't it?
Yeah. Final Fantasy VII is another key, example of something like that, where if you play like especially an upscaled version of it now, you'll see these like really sharp polygons running around these like textured backgrounds that just look really weird and like sort of sharply contrast with each other in terms of their actual fidelity, but allowed them to do the exact same there as well, like have really impressive looking backgrounds with bitty looking sprites.
Yeah. I found it quite interesting when I was thinking about what the gameplay actually is in this game, because I always think of Resident Evil as you fight zombies, but actually to me the gameplay in the first Resident Evil is more puzzle based than that, and it's more sort of discovering the secrets of the mansion. So like things you need to do is you need to go around and you need to actually read the notes if you want to properly figure things out, combine items, investigate items. You get to know the mansion while navigating the dangers that lurk around every turn, and the zombies around the map to me, or around the mansion, to me are more just sort of gameplay interludes to keep things interesting as you're moving from area to area to figure out the puzzles. The only time the game really has an enemy that poses a real threat, I would say, is the hunters to a certain extent, maybe the dogs to a lesser extent, and then there's the what is he called? He's not a titan, he's a Tyrant, that's it. But even them, if you've got a Magnum, he's really no bother at all, because some reason
I found that shocking how easy that final boss is.
They decided to put his heart on the outside of his body, which is an odd design choice if you're designing a monster.
I mean, Frankenstein's monster wasn't exactly perfect, was he? He was no bed of roses.
No, true. Alex, how do you think the themes and the tone of the gameplay come across in 2023, do you think the voice acting undermines the game at all, or do you think it sort of adds a schlocky positive to the game? Or can you have you grown to love the little bits that are cheesy about it?
I think at first I probably did love the bits that are cheesy.
Did you notice they were cheesy when you were? Because when I was a kid,
I think I must have always done. Because I didn't
when I was a kid.
Did you
that
not?
went straight over me.
Because I just all I have in my memory is Chris just going around just talking like, wait, don't move, take this, and all this. Like, so he was obsessed with doing like the arm movements and how terrible they were when we were at school. So I think I've always found that to be dumb. And I think if you look back on it now, you kind of, you give it a pass, I suppose, because they just hired the first English actors that came to the studio or whatever to do the job.
That's one thing that I don't remember. That a lot of these things when I was researching for this podcast, I must have known at some point and I've just forgotten. But I didn't realize that sort of the Japanese version of Resident Evil, Biohazard, has English voice acting in it as well.
Yeah.
And that they just sort of put the Japanese voice subtitles underneath, which it's an interesting design choice.
Yeah, and I guess primarily because they were basing it off of a Western style of horror, they had probably assumed it was going to be marketed for us. I don't know if a lot of Japanese cinema is like that. I mean, I went to Japan and watched a film that was like that.
What was it?
Subtitled. Okay. But yeah, I watched what's the one with like Colin Firth in it, and it's like some kind of James Bond rip-off with that young guy in it. It's had several sequels. Oh, the fuck's it called?
What, the suit one? What'd you call it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's it called? The Tailor? No. The Kingsman.
Yes, Kingsman. That's it. Yeah. So I saw that, and that was subtitled in Japanese, but the voices were all in English. So it's weird just watching that in a Japanese cinema.
Yeah.
But I do have I would have said I thought I had a fondness for how cheesy and shitty the first game is, because it's like, early stages. Having read Itchy Tasty, it's clear that they were very aware for the sequel how bad it actually came across and how like meme worthy it was, even though memes weren't a thing then. But I would say now I barely have a tolerance for it. I don't know why. I don't know where I lost my sense of fun with how silly it is. Like there were points where I started writing notes, and at the early stages of my notes, I'm having a right old laugh, putting about how funny it is that Jill's the master of unlocking, but she doesn't even have her own lockpick and has to get it from Barry and all this kind of shit.
The bits I found,
the game, I was really fed up with it.
Really entertaining was like when Barry was helping Jill down that hole, and he sort of drops.
I've done it.
Yeah, and then he just goes away. He's like, "Wait there, I'll come back." He doesn't.
Yeah.
He's just
how
gone.
like Chris. Without any knowledge of you didn't even do this, did you? Without any knowledge of the fact that it has a purpose, he just lets Rebecca. So when you get to the piano room, Chris doesn't know how to play piano. Jill does, obviously, but for Chris's game, Rebecca comes in to play the piano, and she just like says, I'm going to practice for a bit, and then Chris just like goes around like risking his life fighting off like zombies and monsters, and she's just fucking practicing the piano for like an hour. Obviously, yes, it opens the door, but she doesn't know it's going to do that.
No.
You come back and she's like, I've got it, look, and then plays it for you. I'd be like, well done. I nearly fucking died. Like I said to you when you were playing it, when you fight the snake for the second time and it's like its carcass is rotting, and then Barry comes in, he's like, Jill, did you find anything interesting? As he's walking over the corpse of a giant snake. Like, no, mate, can't think of anything.
No. I find it surprising, but I actually don't find it surprising, because I remember when I was a kid, this is me going on a tangent again, my gran used to tell me that she went to see Snow White at the cinema, and it was an 18 sort of rated movie, and she found it scary. So I guess that like what people find scary and intimidating changes. So it's not surprising, but it's interesting to think that this was sort of the first survival horror, and it's hard to think of this being a survival horror game, because I feel like there's very little horror to this.
I would agree. I would agree some way towards that. I think the dogs jumping through the windows is one of the most
Dogs,
iconic
yeah,
jump scares
that's true.
there's ever been in
Yeah,
gaming.
okay, yeah, you're totally right
That
about that.
still kind of shit me up a little bit this time because I knew it was coming, but
But the
I
dogs
fumbled
look
around with it.
so goofy as well.
Mm.
And maybe it was because of the patch I was using, sort of the HD patch. But like
Oh yeah,
they had
maybe.
they had like really wonky eyes, and they just looked a bit silly to me. But you're right, they do sort of shit you up, and the hunters when you first encounter them because
Yeah.
they're a real danger.
And I think the music is really atmospheric when it kicks in. I think it's got a cool that's sort of got a cool style to it, like this sort of not quite orchestral, but it's very piano heavy kind of spooky music going on. I think obviously the camera angles you can't see what's coming. It's just so hard to take yourself back into that mindset of like seeing this as the revolution that it was back at the time when it came out, because as you said, this was basically ushering in survival horror as a genre. Alone in the Dark maybe, but that game looks even goofier than this.
Yeah.
So this was, it was violent, it was bloody, people can get your head cut off and all that kind of stuff. So I think it probably was scary. It's almost like, that video, it feels to me like it should have had the impact of that classic scene that you see of people like watching a train coming towards them on the very first
And you used to
TV,
run out of the
still
cinema
ducking out
scared,
the
yeah.
way. Yeah. That feels like that's how scary it would have been, because like you've never played anything like this, because horror games before this were what? Ghouls and goblins and zombies ate my neighbors. Not scary, and it can't be scary.
I often, it reminds me when we're talking about this being sort of a horror game. Obviously, the theme and the tone of the game changes when you sort of go underground into the lab area. But I think a lot of the game up until that point, and this is just going to sound totally mad probably, but like to me it always felt like a haunted mansion that they just stuck zombies in instead of ghosts. Obviously because of the type of story they've got with the virus and stuff, it has to be some sort of monster, and zombie as the sort of standard enemy makes sense for sort of what they've got available to them. But yeah, like the way the mansion's set up, where you're like pulling stuff and playing notes on a piano to make doors open and stuff, yeah, it does feel very much to me like a haunted mansion. Yeah, which again, is Sweet Home not got ghosts in it? Did I make that up? Which so maybe that's where it's come from.
Yeah, they probably kept that part and that part alone, and then, as you say, like pivoted towards a zombie story instead of whatever they were doing originally.
So I'm going to go through the different play styles, because I think it's probably worthwhile play styles that we can talk about this. So Jill is the mode I did, and then I sort of poked at Chris. You did both playthroughs, so I'm going to sort of explain the differences between the two characters, and then I want to hear your input and what you thought about the two. The game describes Jill's mode as the easy mode, which I think is probably accurate, but there's a couple of things in here that just makes it feel slightly different rather than a hard mode. But we'll see. So Chris, he's got 6 inventory slots.
That's just bollocks, by the way.
That's I found that annoying. More than challenging,
a hindrance rather than a challenge.
Yeah. Apparently, he can take more damage than Jill can take, though.
Okay.
He needs small keys to open certain things, because Jill's obviously the master lock picker. He doesn't get access to the grenade launcher that Jill gets. He has the lighter, which has a couple of uses. His partner is Rebecca. Is that instead of Barry then?
Yes.
Okay, so his partner's Rebecca, who can heal him a number of times, since his small inventory makes the players lose time and expose themselves to danger more frequently. Chris isn't smart or intelligent, is what this descriptor I found says, as in a game mechanic, of course. So
Voice actor isn't either.
No. So he doesn't know how to play the piano or make the V-Jolt formula to deal with Plant 52. He needs Rebecca to do it, apparently. How does that work with the V-Jolt formula then? Does she just come in and do it for you?
You have to go and fight the plant for the first stage. So you can try and mix the. You can go into the chemical room, but it basically just says Chris doesn't know how to do this. So then I kept thinking to myself, like, how the hell am I going to get Rebecca to make this V-Jolt for me? Because I knew she had to do it from remembering the remake. But yeah, so you have to go in and remember again without the bazooka or the grenade launcher or whatever. Fight the Plant 42 with whatever you've got, and then once you've got through stage 1 of it, it grabs Chris and like just holds him up by the neck. And Rebecca comes in and is like, probably says some terrible dialogue of, "Oh, are you okay?" And then he basically just gets stuck in the room. So he's basically there the whole time, getting strangled by the plant, and then Rebecca just trots off and makes the chemical for him, runs down to the basement, kills the root, and then it ends. But you take over as Rebecca and go make the V-Jolt, and then Chris is just being strangled by it the whole time.
One thing, before I continue this, one thing that's jumped to mind, because I can't remember if I've put it in my notes or not, but it's jumped in my head. We spoke about this when we were speaking about the Resident Evil 2 remake, about whether sort of the two different playthroughs are happening simultaneously, or if they're sort of just two different versions of the same thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Obviously, this one is two different versions of the same thing because you're doing the
Yes.
same things with each character. There is a novelization of this game that was made in which the author sort of took the story and tried to meld it so that is happening simultaneously, and that Chris and Jill are running about the mansion at the same time doing different things. So if you're interested in that, there is a book about that.
Yeah, but I think I tried to look for those books after one of the last couple of podcasts, and they seem to be almost impossible to get hold of and/or extremely expensive.
Well, if you want to send us both a copy, feel free.
Yeah,
Listeners. So he can't do the V-Jolt formula to deal with the plant. Dealing with the hunters, again, this is supposition, but it's probably true, which is why I kept it. Dealing with hunters is harder because you've only got the shotgun, really. You don't have the grenade launcher.
well, yeah, because they do go down with a couple of hits from that. The shotgun, I did find them very tough towards the end of the game. I was running past way more enemies as Chris.
Rebecca also can't save you from the ceiling trap that Barry does Jill at the beginning of the game, because I got the shotgun super early because I took the shotgun off and then just left, and then before you die, Barry comes and saves you, whereas that wouldn't happen to Chris.
I knew there was I knew the Jill sandwich thing happened, but for some reason I thought that was fit in my head because I didn't try it. In my head, I thought it was fixed by Barry walking in and taking the shotgun off you and putting it back. But that's not at all what he does. So I could have had the shotgun way earlier. Great, because I was struggling for ammo so much as Jill for ages at the beginning of the game. Fuck's sake.
Because it wasn't until later, I didn't even realise that was happening. It wasn't until later you stumble across the wooden one. I'm like,
Yeah.
didn't need it.
Damn it.
In the bathroom scene, Chris kills the zombie. I'm not sure what that means, but I kept it in because I thought you might. Do you know what that means?
Is that where you take the plug out of the water or something?
Or could
does
be.
He kill it on automatically or something? I don't know. I can't remember now.
And depending on what you do, Rebecca doesn't survive until the end, so Rebecca can die, which I didn't know either.
Oh. What would you do to make her die? I wonder.
Unsure about that one. Since we're podcasting, I better look.
Because she lived in mine, so I don't know what I would have had to do wrong.
How can Rebecca die? Resident Evil 1. So apparently, Rebecca's death is a possible cutscene in Resident Evil. This scene is triggered if the player Chris Redfield does not save Rebecca from the hunter in time. Receiving this scene means that the research facility will not self-destruct.
The hunter in time. Maybe that was taken out of the DS version because I don't recall that at all.
Interesting.
She was just there to set off the self-destruct, I remember. Maybe they took it out.
Possibly. Just quickly, Jill has 8 inventory slots. She takes less damage than Chris. She's got the lockpick, which removes his necessity.
Wait, less damage?
She can take less damage before she dies, yeah.
Oh, sorry, right. Yeah.
She's got the lockpick, obviously, which we've discussed. She gets access to the grenade launcher, which Barry sometimes gives you ammo for, if you know how to trigger certain scenes. I did not. The lighter is a normal item, which can be discarded after it's used. Her partner Barry, which can help her way more than Rebecca, is on Chris's side. If you abuse Barry's help, though, he dies at the end.
Oh shit! He died
He
for me.
did die for me as well.
So he can live, can he?
Yeah, apparently. You can use him twice. Unfortunately, there's scenes that Barry doesn't help you, but they count
Oh,
as they were.
wow, I
So
didn't
you
know
have
that.
to be careful if you want to save him. I did not know that either. So probably me getting the shotgun earlier led towards him dying.
And I got him to help me right at the beginning of the game, where you go to the zombie and turn around, run back into the dining room, and he shoots it for you.
I think you did. I did as well. You told me
I
to do
think I
that.
told you to do that. Yeah.
Jill can play the
Didn't know I was
piano.
costing Barry his life.
No, neither did I. Jill can play the piano and make the V-Jolt formula by herself. Killing
Isn't
hunters.
she just Miss Perfect?
Yes, she is. She can obviously kill hunters more easily due to the grenade launcher, which it does make hunters a bit of a formality.
Oh, they're so hard in the Chris version.
Yeah. Barry can save you from the ceiling trap. A lot of people do this. You'll be burning one of his helps that you could use to keep him alive. But you'll skip the backtracking of the broken shotgun, saving you valuable minutes if you're trying to speedrun it, I suppose. Barry can also save you from Plant 42 if you didn't make the V-Jolt formula for Chris. It's a requirement. In the bathroom
Yes,
scene.
you have to, that's right. You have to do it to save Chris. But for Jill, I guess, yeah, you just walk in, fight it. It grabs you. Barry comes in and flamethrowers it.
Yeah. And in the bathroom scene, which neither of us can remember, Jill doesn't kill the zombie. There's a lot more differences to the two playthroughs than I initially realised.
Yeah. In fact, I've just remembered what Rebecca says because I've written it down. She walks in as he's being squeezed by the Plant 42 and says, "Chris, don't die."
Oh, he's like, oh, okay. I won't then. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for telling me.
10-4. And then after she does that and kills the root for him, and then whatever, he says, we got to the root of the problem.
Yes, that's good. I like that one.
Mm-hmm.
We'll need to come to that. We'll need to. Maybe we come to it now when we're talking about like favourite little moments of the game. One of my standout highlights is when you're going through the lab and you stumble across a picture of Albert Wesker with all his little scientist mates.
AI generated.
It looks like an AI generated mess. I love that picture. The other thing I like is how, like, if you read the notes and look at the pictures, how obvious it is that Wesker is the villain. But the game plays it so straight face. Like Jill had in my game had literally gone in, read about stuff that contained Albert Wesker, looked at a picture of him in the lab with scientists, and then when he sort of reveals himself, she's very surprised.
You're so cruel, Wesker. Imagine calling him cruel. He wants to extinguish humanity for his own gains. Oh, you meanie.
I don't know if this is a silly question or not, but given that there's several differences, do you have a preference in the playthrough of the two?
Oh, Jill every time.
Is Jill?
100% Jill.
Is it because it's easier, or is like the reduced inventory slots a sort of deal breaker? Because other than that, I think maybe there's the added difficulty to the Chris section might be a positive if you've played the game a few times.
Yeah, I would recommend always doing the Jill playthrough first, because then you get to experience the game as a bit more prepared.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I say, I did find Chris is quite tough at times when I just had barely any ammo, and as you said, hunters especially were an absolute nightmare, taking loads of shotgun shells. But it's just having the grenade launcher and having the inventory space. It just makes the game less fucky. Like there's less dicking about. I had like issues with puzzles that involved cranks and stuff where I was just the one where you go into that room and you've got to push a statue kind of in front of the wall and then turn the crank to like make the wall come out, then turn it again so the wall goes back in, so you can then push the statue. I just ruined it. I think I had to go back and forth like 3 or 4 times because I kept forgetting how many slots I needed to have empty, and it's just stupid. So that really drags the experience down when you're playing as Chris more than anything else. Everything else I think is pretty fine. And like you said, the additional difficulty is quite fun. But yeah, this is a Jill game for sure.
I really like that they do this and that essentially create two different playthroughs that are sort of, if you played Resident Evil back in '96 and you loved this game and this was your jam, they create enough and have made enough differences to this to warrant multiple playthroughs. And like we're just saying, being able to keep your companions alive versus them dying.
Yeah.
There's also multiple playthroughs within the same characters. That's really cool. I think that's a really cool addition that I wasn't aware of coming into this, like, play this game and before I started prepping for this podcast.
Yeah, that seems to be. This is, this could just be like me assuming something completely bollocks, but it feels like that's quite like a JRPG trope that would have carried over from the 16-bit era more than anything else. Like, I don't think many other types of genre would have been doing things like multiple endings, different playthroughs, consequences for certain things other than that kind of game. So it feels like quite a revolutionary idea to have these two different playthroughs that you can have. I can't think of many other games of this type around that era.
I think revolutionary is quite a good, accurate descriptor there, because I guess we speak about this a few times on different game podcasts that we've done, but like, video games, like, live service exists because they want you to keep you involved in that ecosystem. I mean, I got an email today talking about Hitman. They've got a new contract coming out that they want you to go and hunt other people that have guided. I mean, a lot of games make their money by keeping you in the ecosystem and then keeping you engaged with this game. And this is actually a very, very early way to make you come back to the game, which I think is very interesting. And I don't know, maybe there's a lot of tendrils you can see in, like, the way games have evolved. I think that's one of my favourite things about Resident Evil overall, is that there's so many things that we've sort of come across in the games that we've played over the last 2 years, in the various Resident Evil games, and you can see the sort of beginnings of an idea that have eventually become bigger things. And I think that is probably Resident Evil's legacy, isn't it? Is that... Yeah. Obviously, it's the sort of granddaddy of the survival horror genre, which, again, as we've spoken about, is quite funny because I don't find this game scary at all. But it probably was back in the day, and I do take your point about the dogs and the hunters and stuff like that. They are quite scary. I guess it's just standout memories, isn't it? Whereas I'm remembering the schlocky dialogue and the zombies that aren't really a threat. They're just more of a obstacle to get around. But I think
if you play this game in 2023, you are going to notice that as the focal point of what you're experiencing. That it just sounds stupid, and the words don't make very much sense because they're badly translated or localized anyway. So that is going to hit home to you more than the so-called scares of this game. And it doesn't help the fact that like most of the original zombies, like the early game zombies you see, are just like grey blokes with no hair. They look fucking shit. Like, the early zombies in this game look terrible. You compare the zombies in this to the ones in 2, they're so much better. Like, I'm really looking forward to you seeing 2, having played this, and you'll see what a massive leap it was to the second one.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to, I think it's kind of does. It feels like a bit of an also ran for this game, but I feel like we need to quickly run through the plot. So bear with me, Alex, and I'll quickly go through what this game is about, and then we can have a quick chat about the plot and what we think about it.
Okay.
So on the 24th of July, 1998, when a series of bizarre murders occur on the outskirts of the fictional town Midwestern of Raccoon City, the Raccoon City Police Department STARS team are assigned to investigate. After contact with Bravo team is lost, Alpha team is sent in.
The team Rebecca's on, obviously.
Yes. Alpha team is sent to investigate their disappearance. Alpha team locates Bravo team's crashed helicopter and land at the site, where they are suddenly attacked by a pack of monstrous dogs. After Alpha team's helicopter pilot, Brad Vickers, panics and takes off alone. Cheers, Brad. The remaining members of the team, Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Albert Wesker, and Barry Burton, are forced to seek refuge in a nearby abandoned mansion. Depending on which character the player chooses to assume control of, Chris or Jill, either Barry or Chris are separated from the rest of the team during the chase and do not make it to the mansion. The team decides to investigate the mansion to search for their missing team member. As the team members explore the mansion, they encounter dangerous creatures roaming the halls. The player character eventually learns that a series of illegal experiments were being undertaken by a clandestine research team under the supervision of biomedical company Umbrella Corporation. The creatures roaming the mansion and its surrounding areas are the results of these experiments, which have exposed the mansion's personnel and various animals and insects to a highly contagious and mutagenic biological agent known as the T-virus. The player may also encounter several members of Bravo Team, including Enrico Marini, who reveals that one of Alpha Team's members is a traitor before being shot and killed by an unseen assailant. It must be Wesker, right? Eventually, the player character discovers a secret underground laboratory containing Umbrella's experiments. In the lab, the player encounters Wesker, who reveals that he is a double agent working for Umbrella and plans to use the Tyrant, a giant humanoid super soldier, to kill the remaining STARS members. In the ensuing confrontation, Wesker is seemingly killed and the player character defeats the Tyrant. After activating the lab's self-destruct system, the player character reaches the heliport and manages to contact Brad for extraction, at which point the Tyrant may confront them one last time. The game features multiple endings depending on the player's actions at key points over the course of the game. The best ending sees the player character saves their partner, Rebecca Chambers, or for Chris's campaign, or Barry for Jill's, as well as a team member imprisoned in the lab, Jill for Chris's campaign, and vice versa. If at least the partner survives, the Tyrant is defeated and the mansion destroyed. Otherwise, the mansion remains intact and the Tyrant remains loose in the forest if the partner or team member is left to permanently die. Alex, time to bring you back in. What do you think of the story? I think it's interesting how hokey the whole thing comes across, and I'm never sure whether the lore and fandom that surrounds the series now is because of the game or in spite of the first game. Resident Evil has over the years embraced the silly aspects of the game, which I think probably is to its credit. I think personally this largely supports the pacing of the game, because I think like when I'm quite interested in horror as a sort of narrative device. We've spoken about this before, in that like if you, whether it's movies or games or TV series, whatever, you have to sort of vary the tension. You sort of build up to a moment, you have the climax, and then you come back down again and give them some safety. I think a lot of, like, again, to go back to Alien Isolation, part of what I find utterly exhausting and probably made me feel quite ill when I was playing the game is because it's rare that you actually get that second to breathe and feel fully safe, where this game certainly does allow you that time to sort of decompress and feel better before it starts ratcheting up the tension again. I do kind of wish the voice acting was better, though. I think the game is certainly worse for that, even though it's funny and it's entertaining to laugh about. I do wish it was better, but other than that, I think it's quite well paced, quite well created, and the story's good enough to sort of propel you through. What do you think?
I agree. I completely agree. I like what the story is propped up by in terms of the lore. Mm-hmm. I think it's like a really smart way to deliver. That's a great way to describe that. Yeah, propped where you've got great lore. Yeah, you've got this evil company that's developing these bioweapons on purpose and like trying to test them out in this area. You've got Wesker as a double agent working for them. So rather than just like having, the George Romero dead people coming out of graves because of there's no more room in hell or whatever it is, and there's not even anything in this game that really like tries to dive into that whole zombie like trope of, oh, my friend's bitten, oh, he's turning into a zombie. The one that Walking Dead does like in every series like 3 times. There's nothing of that in this game. And then you've got all these like hideous mutations and things going on, and it leads quite nicely into like the opening trilogy of games. The way that the story is told sort of concurrently from different viewpoints and different parts of the city.
Spot on.
So I really like the story of this. As you say, it is well paced. It's got some decent action packed moments as well. You've got like giant spiders and snakes, and you've got rocket launchers to shoot the Tyrant with and stuff like that. It's just let down by a weak, like a really nonsensical script and terrible voice acting. And again, maybe the remake we will come and look at next time we do this Summer of Resi, and we'll think, oh yeah, they told the story in a much better way that's more believable and like entertaining. And isn't ruined by limitations of the time, or maybe we'll think it's worse. Who knows? We'll find out. But I'm interested to see how that treats this story with a fully fresh mind with this in my memory than I am just sort of trying to piece it together in my head.
Can you remember how you felt about the story back in 1996, 97 when you would have been playing this game for the first time?
Resident Evil is a series that for me was always delivered to me from my friend Chris. So I was big Nintendo guy. I had N64. I didn't have a PlayStation really. So he was always the one like showing me Resident Evil and got me into the series, and we'd play it together all the time. So I think he kind of laid it onto me and got me interested in why it was so cool. And I do remember thinking it was like a really cool idea, really cool story, horror, zombies, all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I think I've always thought it was cool. I probably didn't even think that the acting was as annoying as I do now. I probably found it funny back then. I don't find it as funny now. I think it's becoming grouchier in my old age. But
I would love.
Yeah, I've never felt anything but.
I was watching the cutscenes in this game, and I would love to see the live action stuff without all the filtering over the top in good HD.
That's in the Japanese version. Yeah.
Is it? Because I think
it's not grey or anything.
Wesker must look hilarious, because I can even tell in the sort of like filtered out JPEG-y pixelated nonsense that Wesker is just a really young dude with like, he's got like a really bad wig, or he's got like that really bad yellow spray in his hair, and it just looks,
got yellow spray in his hair.
I really want to see it. Really want to see it. Maybe go looking for it after this podcast.
Yeah, definitely.
But we'll talk a bit about the development of the game. Let's go. So Resident Evil, I'll try and break this up. It's a bit wordy again, so I apologise for that. But I'll try and break it up a little bit. Resident Evil was created by a team of staff members who would later go on to become part of Capcom Production Studio 4. The inspiration for Resident Evil was earlier Capcom horror game, as was spoken about, Sweet Home, which was released in 1989. Shinji Mikami was commissioned to make a game set in a haunted mansion. Okay, this does link back to what we're talking about, like Sweet Home, and early on the game was intended to be a remake of Sweet Home. The project was proposed by Sweet Home creator Tokaru Fujiwara, did I get that okay? Who was Mikami's mentor and served as the game's producer. Fujiwara said the basic premise was that he'd be able to do all the things that he wasn't able to include in Sweet Home, which I think is a very tropey thing that video game developers say quite a lot. It's just like, oh, we'll finally be able to utilise the power of X console and realise what our dream always was for this game. It's mainly, he says, on the graphics front, and he was confident that horror games could become a genre in themselves. He entrusted Mikami, who was initially reluctant because he hated being scared, which is hilarious, with the project because he understood what's frightening. Since Capcom no longer had the rights to Sweet Home license, they had to invent a new universe, but the game still adopted many of the elements from Sweet Home. You've never played Sweet Home, right? This is not a thing either of us have engaged with.
Did Sweet Home actually come out in the West?
I don't think it did. No,
Japan.
No, we'd have to get some dodgy back alley version of the game.
I would be astonished if there hasn't been a fan translated patch for Sweet Home.
Oh, it's almost certain. Like we said before, Resident Evil was based on Sweet Home's gameplay system, adopting many elements from the game, including the limited inventory management, the mansion setting, the puzzles, the emphasis on survival, the door loading screen as another example, the use of scattered notes and diary entries for storytelling mechanics, multiple endings, depending on how many characters survive, backtracking to previous locations in order to solve puzzles later on, the use of death animations, individual character items such as lockpick or lighter, restoring health through items scattered across the mansion, the intricate layout of the mansion, and brutally horrific imagery. Basically, this is a modern sort of 1996 take on what Sweet Home was, as we've already discussed. Apparently part of the inspiration for the limited ammunition came from the MSX port of the game, a game called Alcazar the Forgotten Fortress. According to scenario writer Kenichi Iwao, the idea of having limited ammunition was inspired by the limited amount of supplies in the game's randomised dungeons. Iwao wanted to take more of the elements from the game, such as adding more ways to attack zombies with items such as mines, traps, but was unable due to schedule constraints. That would have been cool. To be able to plant traps for zombies and stuff.
Yeah.
Even like lay mines for hunters coming across later in the game would have been quite fun.
Yeah.
And I guess we saw that to an extent. There were mines in Resident Evil 3, if I remember correctly, back from our time playing that.
Mine launcher, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
I
ended up just shooting that at the zombies, though. So I don't think I used it right. I think I was shooting it at the ground. Just trying to shoot them in the face with it.
Is any of that news to you, Alex? I assume you knew most of that going in.
I would have read it, I guess, in Old Itchy, but I don't remember that because I didn't read the first chapter again for this podcast. So yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I guess there's not much we can really talk about that. So I guess that in terms of production for the game began in 1993 and the game took 3 years to develop. During the first 6 months of development, Mikami worked in the game alone, creating concepts, sketches, designing characters and writing apparently over 40 pages worth of script, which seems like not a lot, but actually in 1997 when sort of game story was often an afterthought and sort of a...
Well, this is 93, so yeah.
Yeah. I got my dates wrong there. Yeah, so this probably is quite a moment. Maybe that's something that I've underappreciated.
There's 40 pages worth of script in the game, like off the top of my head. It doesn't feel like 40 pages worth of talking.
No, maybe he's doing a lot of background.
Or maybe he was writing all those scientist notes and stuff.
Yeah. Or he's got a whole backstory for Barry that we can discover when he dies in his memoirs.
Yeah, he had to write the Itchy Tasty thing, didn't he? The classic note itself, which has that amazing line in it where it says something about what does it say? Itchy Scott came, ugly face, so killed him. Amazing. Classic.
As we touched on at the start of the podcast, the project was originally planned for the Super NES before moving development onto the PlayStation in 1994. A man called Koji Oda was working on the Super NES version after having worked on Super Ghouls and Ghosts in 1991. Oda revealed that the setting was originally more of a hellish place before being changed to a more realistic setting.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it doesn't jive with the Sweet Home stuff, I guess. But yeah, I guess I guess you would sort of discuss all aspects of this game and change and remove and move things back. Yeah. Apparently, which I think is really interesting, several of the and after I read this, I can kind of see it. Several of the Resident Evil Mansion's pre-rendered backdrops were inspired by the Overlook Hotel, which is the setting for the 1980 horror film / Stephen King book, The Shining. Mikami also cited that the 1978 Dawn of the Dead was a negative inspiration for the game. The game was initially conceived as a fully 3D first-person update of Sweet Home, influenced by the game's first-person battles with action and shooting mechanics. A first-person prototype was produced and initially featured supernatural psychological Japanese horror style to Sweet Home, similar to that of Sweet Home, before opting for an American zombie horror style influenced by the George Romero films. I think that is jumped out of my head as I was reading that. Interested to think that the version of this game that you played did have first-person sections in it. And it makes me wonder if actually, in a weird way, you're playing sort of the true original concept in a strange backwards way.
Yeah, there's every chance that was like finally realizing their original vision,
which is bizarre to think of now.
Yeah,
they just needed to wait for 2006 for the DS to come out, and then they could, as Mikami says, fully utilize, or is it one of them could utilize the power of the console to realize his dreams.
Yeah.
He made it. Yeah. During production, as again, Alex, you've touched on, during production, Mikami discovered Alone in the Dark, 1992, which apparently influenced him to adopt a cinematic fixed-view camera system. Mikami said that if it wasn't for Alone in the Dark, Resident Evil would have had a first-person view, as we've discussed, instead. Mikami was initially reluctant to adapt Alone in the Dark's fixed view camera system, saying it had an effect on immersion. Which I guess it
Understandable.
Understandable, and it's sort of, yeah, I get that.
It's more atmospheric than it is immersive, isn't it?
Yeah, his feeling was that it would make the player feel a little bit more detached. Again, this age-old first person means you feel like the character you're controlling thing over the third person, which I don't necessarily agree with.
Not always, yeah.
But eventually he adopted it because the use of the pre-rendered backdrops allowed for a higher level of detail than this fully 3D first-person view prototype, which didn't get along so well with the original PlayStation specs. So much for the power of the machine, eh? A concept art claimed to be of the original first-person prototype has been available since the 1990s, showing more similarity to Doom rather than Alone in the Dark. This is supposition, I suppose, based on where I read this. First-person perspective was not used again in the mainline Resident Evil series until Resident Evil 7 Biohazard in 2017. Again, that's another interesting thing, given that this game originally started life as a first-person game, that it sort of, again, closed the loop and come back to that once more.
Yeah.
It's not like this is not a revelatory moment, but it's just something that I think is a little interesting bit of info. A later prototype featured co-op gameplay, apparently, but this feature was eventually removed as Mikami said it technically wasn't good enough. Alex, how do you think a co-op game like this would work? Do you think one person controls Jill, one person controls Chris, and you just run off? Because do you remember sort of co-op games sort of in their, not nascent days, but in the Xbox 360, the one that jumps to my mind is Fable 2, in which you could play co-op, or the Lego games that you could play co-op, and that there's this invisible tether that would join the characters together, which meant you couldn't get too far apart before being brought back. Yeah. I wonder how they would have done that. I assume because it's the PlayStation, you would have had to go the same way. You couldn't go off and do different things. Again,
unless they did split screen, or did that say then that wasn't the plan?
Just the info I've got, it just says it just technically wasn't good enough.
Right.
Again, like I know I've sort of jumping on this bandwagon, but Resident Evil 0 again sort of realizes these things that they were perhaps trying to do. Yeah, I don't know. I think a co-op game would be interesting. I mean, I think Resident Evil 0 proves that it can be done, and it can be interesting and fun.
Well, they had that desire for that for a long time for Resident. I remember that was an N64 game, 0. So they really wanted to do this like zapping mechanic where you switch between two characters. So maybe that was something that they really wanted to realize in terms of a co-op mechanic. Obviously, there's the Outbreak games that we haven't played yet.
Was that the ones we were thinking about playing and just never quite made it happen?
Yeah, we kind of pivoted, knowing we wouldn't be able to spend a lot of time congregating to play this game together. That we'd do one and we could play solo, but that we will come to that at some point because it's doable on a PC. But I assume that based on that, you're looking at your own screen because it's online, and then you are just running around the same area, so it's effectively like a giant split screen version.
Yeah,
it'd be interesting to see how that actually works out. And whether you just get in each other's way and become annoying or whatever, because it's the actual co-op Resident Evil games are very much focused around that. And obviously, they work better because of the over-the-shoulder view. So yeah, like two co-op people around the same like fixed camera angle could look very odd.
Yeah. The only sort of info I've got on this that they had, I've been sort of scanning through, trying to see what more info I had on the co-op version of the game, and the only thing that I can see is that the prototype version that apparently was a demo was made at the 1995 something called a V-Jump Festival, which I've never heard of.
Neither.
It had active sort of weapon swapping, so you could sort of in real time pass weapons to one another, which I guess would help in terms of inventory management. I guess that would make things interesting. Yeah. Let's have a look. What else we've got? Yeah. So that's the real time weapon swapping. Capcom apparently did not use any motion capture in the game, unsurprising.
Yeah.
Despite having their own motion capture studio, instead the animators referred to books and videos to study how people, spiders, and other animals encountered in the game moved.
I always respect that.
Yeah.
Like, I know motion capture obviously gets the greatest level of realism, but I do respect a developer just wanting to completely animate something from that.
They still do that from time to time. The one that jumps to my mind is Annapurna's recent game. It's Annapurna, I'm sure, Stray, that came out in PS5 and has recently come to Xbox. Yeah. That game is not motion captured. It is entirely animated. And I don't know how I know that.
Fight Forever isn't motion captured either.
Was it not? Do you still play that game? No. So one thing that jumped up as a little aside, jumped onto my news feed last week was that the 30-man Battle Royale is coming out.
Yeah.
Is it out now? It should be out. Have you tried? You've got to, surely you've tried it. Come on.
I haven't yet because I've been watching AEW in Wembley instead all weekend. But
Alex, get down to that beer shop in your fantastic little town, buy yourself a couple beers, go home, smash one of them over your forehead and boot up the AEW 30-man Battle Royale. That sounds really fun. Just sounds chaotically insane.
Yeah, it's got the same stuff. It's got like the Jesus Christ. It's got the the circle moving in and getting smaller and smaller and all that kind of stuff. Apparently, it doesn't even have like grapples in it. It takes that move out.
So where's it set? I thought it would be in a ring. I thought in my head
stadium.
In my head, it was like a Royal Rumble type idea.
That's what a friend of mine wanted it to be, but no, this is called Stadium Stampede, so it's based off of a real thing that they did during COVID, where they had the running of the Jacksonville Jaguars Stadium because Tony Khan's dad owns that football team, so they put this insane match on throughout the stadium. So this is what that is. This is like an actual BR, not a Royal Rumble. This is an actual Battle Royale.
I love the idea of being able to party up with your mates, enjoying an online Royal Rumble, and just sit and chat over headsets while you either sit and watch the game.
I wonder if that's ever been done. Surely the WWE games must have done that.
I can't think of it ever happening. But yeah, you're right. I'm hardly a wrestling game connoisseur. So especially if you could like, if they sort of Call of Duty-ified your character and you could level him up and unlock different stuff, and you could make like, I don't know, Alex Aldridge 316 whatever.
Yeah. Classic old Alex Kidd 316.
Yeah, that would be fun. Apparently in pre-production, other characters were conceived for the game. There was Dewey, who is an African-American man. He was intended to perform a comic relief role because there wasn't enough of that, Alex.
They brought that back in fucking Dino Crisis, I think.
Yeah, they did. While someone called Gelzer, Gelzer, he was a big cyborg. Lucky he's gone. He was a typical strong man.
How did this game become as like grounded as it did?
I know.
The ideas they were having were absolutely batshit.
Apparently, he was a strongman character, and both were later replaced by Rebecca and Barry, respectively. Thank goodness.
Fucking robot.
I know. Almost all the development was done on Silicon Graphics hardware using the software program Softimage. That means absolutely nothing to me, but I thought it was interesting nonetheless.
Yeah.
The PlayStation was chosen. What I thought was interesting was the PlayStation was chosen as the lead platform because the development team felt it was the most appropriate game in terms of things such as the amount of polygons they could have on screen. Development team had upwards of 80 people working towards the end of the game's development, which probably in the 90s was quite a big development team, right?
Yeah.
I know it's quite small now given the hundreds that we've got. Apparently, Capcom were hesitant to port the game to the Sega Saturn because the hardware was not as ideally suited to the game as the PlayStation. Ensuring the port would take a long time. A Saturn version was finally unveiled, as we said, at the April 1997 Tokyo Game Show, at which Capcom also showed a demo for the sequel on PlayStation. So getting a dig in at their own game, really.
Yeah.
Alex, you
want to try that Saturn one just to see if it's.
Yeah, you don't own it, do you?
No, but it's on the list.
How much is it?
Maybe when we go down to York, I'll grab it. I've probably got it saved somewhere. Hang on.
We're done with you.
Fucking hell, my internet's dying. Oh, there we go. Oh. Oh my god. Okay, right. 45 quid on CEX. £60 if you want it mint. So pretty expensive.
Yeah. It's annoyingly not expensive enough to think I'm never buying that, if that makes sense. That's just about the upper level of I'm going to end up with that on my shelf. For Alex, anyway.
Yeah, I need to find some video about somebody talking about what if that's terrible or what.
Yeah, we're going to have to go hunting. I'm going to go hunting after this and then probably text you about it. The live action, as we've spoken about most of this, but it's probably worth going over again. The live action full motion video sequences were filmed in Japan with a cast of American actors. All Japanese releases contain the English voice acting with Japanese captions and text. However, Japanese voice performers were also recorded but left unused. As Mikami found the quality of the performance inadequate.
Christ, that must have been awful.
Yeah.
Look how low the bar already was.
I assume Mikami doesn't speak English and he just didn't know how bad the English versions were. However, apparently lead programmer Yashiro Anpo later said that due to all the development staff being Japanese, they were unaware of the poor localization. That apparently hindered the realism and immersion of the title for the international release, which is one of the reasons for the redub in the 2002 remake.
No shit.
Can you remember how the redub was received? Were people annoyed? Were people happy about it?
No, I don't think people would have been annoyed about that. That was probably one of the key things that made everybody love it so much and think it was one of the best remakes ever done. And still people think that. Fujiwara
said the game was originally targeted towards a core audience and he only expected to sell around 200,000 copies before the game went on to sell millions. Mikami said that he was a little worried about how well a horror game would really sell. Anpo said that Capcom did not expect the game to be successful. And how wrong they were.
How wrong they were. Still having to drag them out now.
They are. I've got a bit about the English localization here, but I think, to be honest, you've probably covered most of that. To be quick about it, Biohazard was renamed we've done this in previous podcasts, but not this one. Biohazard was renamed in North American and European markets after a man called Chris Kramer, the director of communications at Capcom, pointed out that it would be impossible to trademark it in the United States. Among others, the 1992 video game Biohazard Battle and the New York alternative metal band Biohazard were already using the name. Capcom ran an internal company contest to find out the new name Resident Evil was chosen since the game takes place in a mansion. Kramer thought that the name was super cheesy, but the rest of the marketing crew loved it and were ultimately able to convince Mikami that the name fit. The cover artwork for the American European
game anyway.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit any of the other ones because none of them are in a mansion.
I really like the Japanese name Biohazard. Do you have a preference of the two?
I just love Resident Evil. I just think it doesn't make any sense, but I just love
makes no sense
those two words together. Yeah, those two words together just sing to me. I don't know why. And I don't like that band Biohazard, so that's possibly why I don't like that.
Oh, have you listened to them?
Oh yeah, they were about when I was like listening to that kind of music.
Were they?
I really liked them though. They're like
big?
Proper like New York hardcore. No,
because I thought I would have heard of them, but I haven't at all.
No, they're quite a sort of mid-level band. They were, but I saw them on like Kerrang or Scuzz or whatever the channels were back in the day. P Rock or something. I don't know.
Interesting. The only other bit of info I've got in terms of the localization and stuff was the stuff that we've already talked about with the adding and removing of certain cutscenes and gore and stuff like that. The only thing I want to say, I guess, in terms of that is I think the the Resident Evil box art is one of the more bizarre box arts I've seen in video games.
Yes.
It's really, really odd.
The twisted face of Chris Redfield looks like he's having a stroke. It's really, really bizarre. What's the alternatives to that?
It's
Is there a
just
Japanese.
Yeah, I think there are. Let me have a quick look here. There are, but I'm sure it is just the name in various incarnations.
Oh, okay, because this DualShock director's cut that I've got is weird because it's just like a picture of the stairs in the mansion.
That's right. Yeah, so it's pictures of stairs in the mansion. There's Chris Redfield. There's also the director's cut, which is sort of a zombie looking over his shoulder seductively.
Is there?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll need to send you a picture of that. Can I share my screen? Will it allow me to do that? Share my screen. Look at that. This one, Alex. Go live. Hopefully it records it. Yeah, it does.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's obviously supposed to be the first zombie in the game, isn't it? The old creepy...
Yeah,
Tony
that's the guy
McGee.
that's eating... My
Kenneth.
thing... Yeah, that's
Kenneth,
it.
where it says he's become a shell of his former self, a shadow of his former self. Sorry, I'll say that again. It's eating Kenneth, who it says when you sort of press on his body, it says Kenneth has become a shadow of his former self. He's had his head ripped off, for fuck's sake.
Yeah,
that.
It's got spiders on it as well, which are
a
relatively minor part of the game. Then that's a better one, isn't it?
That's beautiful. That is excellent. What the hell is that?
What is that from? I've never seen that one in my life.
It's got something underneath it. What's it say?
Legend has it that Capcom originally chose this for RE1's cover art.
Oh god. Yeah, the box art that they've got for it, it's really weird because it kind of looks like there's something in the ceiling.
One. This one?
Yeah, it's like zombie hands, but it looks like it's being sort of reflected on a ceiling with like projector, doesn't it?
The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That looks like Raphael or something there.
Yeah. So odd. Yeah. Not an iconic box art. Maybe it is, I don't know.
Iconically bad, in my opinion. We spoke about this last week, but the reception of the game's got a 91 on Metacritic on PS1 and a 71 on DS. The sales combined, I find this game is a hard game to get the sales figures for, and I couldn't remember what you said last week, but I managed to... I got PS1 sales only at 5.08 million units. And it was the first game to be dubbed survival horror, which I think is... If anything, it is as good as it is. It's also important because it started an entire genre of itself. The only other thing I've really got to do is I've got a quick run through of the different levels. So, like the sort of main areas of the game. I looked up a couple guides for this.
5.08 million is exactly what I had, by the way.
Excellent, nailed it
from the Capcom official platinum list thing. I'll send you that because I'm sure you'll actually get a real kick out of that.
Yeah, please. Yeah, so I went through a few guides to sort of I was trying to break the game up into different sections and different levels to discuss and see if there was anything after we'd gone through the podcast to see that we'd maybe want to touch on. So we've got entering the mansion, escaping the mansion, in the courtyard, subject plant 42, the hunters, underground, and the bioweapon. Entering the mansion, to me, is it's the bit that everybody sees, right? It's the most iconic bit where you're sort of discovering it, and it's probably, I don't know, of those bits I sort of, and this is unfair because I just rattled it off really quickly and then asked you a question after you've probably forgotten them. But in terms of areas of the game, what standout parts have you got? Is there any aspects of the game you didn't enjoy? What are your favourite memories of it?
I don't think I did. I didn't enjoy any part of it, but I certainly cannot help but prefer the mansion to everywhere else. The underground bit, I think, is probably the weakest part.
Yeah,
where you're going in and out of that boulder bit.
Yeah, I think that's almost.
Although I do enjoy the turny thing where you can turn the walls and walk through it, but
that bit, I think I said it, I don't know if you were watching, but when I was streaming it, that gives me certain Lara Croft vibes, and it's just the dirty polygonal textures as you're running through a cave that I was getting from that.
Totally. Yeah, I completely agree. It looks like Tomb Raider, spot on. I don't mind the lab. I think that's a nice. It sort of brings the game back into some interesting stuff with the computer that you've got to use the password on to get in and open some of the doors and things like that. Those horrible enemies on the ceiling that swipe down at you.
Oh yeah.
Not even sure what they're called or what they are. They're sort of like, they're not spiders, but they have multiple legs, and I hate them. But yeah, the mansion is just iconic, and it's actually really well laid out and put together for such an early realization of this type of model that they were going to use moving forward.
Yeah,
as you said, the puzzles are not crazy obtuse. They're mainly just putting things in other things. So yeah, that's obviously the standout, especially the earlier parts of it as well. You're first coming up against zombies, and you're first coming up against dogs through the windows and crows. Like that room when you've got to do the puzzle with the crows, kind of all round it, is proper creepy. You've got to press pictures of like that little boy that then goes into an old man, which I felt quite funny when it said the second to last one is like a tired middle-aged man or something. It's like, all right, calm down.
I don't understand why certain periods throughout this game they like to throw a lot of crows at you. It doesn't really make sense. Like, can the crows smell the T virus? Like that's almost sort of like supernatural. Like, it reminds me of a witch or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. I guess it goes back to that haunted mansion type idea with the supernatural rather than the sci-fi, I guess, that it's going for.
Yeah, I guess they probably just thought, like, what else would you have in a forest?
What's spooky?
I don't know, birds. Oh, there you go.
Let's put them in an enclosed room. How did they get there? How did they leave? Why are they not dead?
Yeah, how did they contract the T virus, as you say? Unless there's some notes that we've missed where someone talks about feeding it to the birds or something. I don't know.
Could be.
Where the spiders coming from? Why are they so massive, but the birds aren't?
My favorite aspect in almost any Resident Evil game without fail is sort of the mansion police station section. I always sort of like it less when it goes underground towards the inevitable lab that you find. And I don't know why, because self-destruct, because it's present in all the games, so it's not like it's an unusual thing to have. But yeah, I love the idea of the. And again, I was going to say, right, David, you're not going to talk about this because you talk about it in every bloody Resident Evil podcast. But I love the idea when the environment becomes almost a character in its own right, and the backtracking that this game forces you to do. Sort of forces you against your will, whether you want to or not. Maybe not against your will, but it forces you to sort of learn the layout of the mansion. And like when it gets to there's times I didn't, but for the most part, you get to points in this game where it's like, oh, I need to go there, and you know exactly where you're going, and you almost don't need the map. Yeah. I love that about these games.
Me too.
It was part of what made me fall in love with Dead Space back in the day, even though in hindsight it wasn't as open as I thought it was.
Yeah.
But it just sort of made the place that you were existing in its own thing. That was part of the game's atmosphere and stuff like that. Is probably my favourite thing about it.
Completely agree. It becomes like a strategic element to the game, added with like the item management and learning the layouts. And I think there is an argument to be had that historically, from this first game till right up to now, Resident Evil games do continue to fall into a trap of creating such engrossing and stellar opening areas of their games, and that then always seem to sort of lose a bit of steam or drop off a little bit as they go forward. You've got, as you said, the mansion, then the police station. Resident Evil 4, you've got the village before you then start going off towards castles and all that other stuff. You've got Resident Evil 7 with the Baker House, which then changes into that terrible shit bit later on. Resident Evil Village, the village versus, again, the castle-y bits later on. So they keep doing it. They keep having these great, iconic settings that then, as you move out of them, become a little bit more... Yeah, they lose steam on their way to these eventual laboratories or whatever.
How do you feel about the idea that obviously this is made by a Japanese developer and a Japanese publisher, but they're shooting for an American style of horror. And we've spoken about this both off of podcast and on podcasts over the years, that the Japanese are really famous for creating quite effective psychological horror in their own right. And that if you're looking for horror, a lot of people will go to the Japanese for something that is really quite unsettling. And I find it interesting that the Japanese have created a series and sort of shied away from doing the classic Japanese stuff. Do you think, obviously the game would be very different if they tried to do a more classically Japanese horror game. Do you think better or worse, or is that an unfair question because it's just an unknown, I guess?
That is a really good question. And I guess the closest we can get to an answer for that is probably something like the Fatal Frame games or Project Zero, as we were forced to call them in this country. Or something like, I mean, Silent Hill probably goes more towards the psychological aspect of it, whereas this is just straight up like, Western influenced gore and monsters. And I like that that's its place in the horror genre of video games, that it sort of opened itself up with this element of horror, and it's stuck to that, where other games have gone off in different aspects of it.
I guess the more recent games, especially 7 and 8, have allowed them to sort of stretch their legs and look into different aspects of what horror is.
Yes.
Again, largely sticking to sort of Western horror, but there are bits, like I think that probably certainly this 8, or is it 7 or 8? I always get those two mixed up, but the baby section that's following you about, that's probably more
8,
Japanese than British, sort of Western, European, American.
Yeah.
But
that definitely delves more towards that side of it, yeah. And I guess they try to maybe do that in 7 with the little girl. I mean, that's a bit of a trope of Japanese horror these days, isn't it? Like a spooky little girl. But
True.
that Evelyn, or whatever her name is, has all these psychic powers. That's a very Japanese type of horror.
Yeah, that's a great shout. What about the weapons and enemies? What do you think? Is there any enemies? I guess, like, for me, the one that sticks out is the hunter, because the first time I encountered a hunter, he basically ran up to me and took my head clean off, and it's like, oh, these are like a different level of danger from the standard zombies. And then there's
that's a very funny death scene as well, where it's just like her lying like T-posing with no head. And it just sort of spins the camera around over the top of it. It's great.
And then the snake as well. He's quite
Snake's
intimidating.
Dumb,
he's intimidating in the fact that he's insofar as I find, in my experience anyway, he was dangerous. But you're right, he is a bit silly. He just also doesn't really fit to me with the rest of what's going on in the mansion. Where does he come from? But yeah, like the dog. Probably the classic for me is the enemies are the dogs and the hunters. Like you say, the final enemy is a joke if you've got a magnum. Like 3 shots and he's dead.
Yeah,
it's bizarrely bad.
Even with Chris. Yeah. They definitely never made that mistake again, did they? Every other game since then just got some absolute unit after you.
Unit with a glowing pustule that you've got to shoot usually.
Yeah.
The weapons for me, I don't know if you would agree with this, but and it's certainly just a personal preference thing, but I love a shotgun in a game. I just love a shotgun, and this is a good shotgun. You get good shotguns, you get bad shotguns. This is a good shotgun. Do you have a favourite weapon that you would sort of go to, or is it just what you had available?
I was surprised actually playing the Duel game to realise how much ammo they gave you for that.
Yeah,
again, that's I guess because Barry's coming in, dropping stuff off, and I didn't expect it because obviously on the DS version they called it bazooka, so I was confused at first what I was even going to put in it.
How can you explain to me how they have the? Sorry, what were you about to say?
Oh, I was just saying, and then you're getting like flame rounds and acid rounds and explosive rounds. So that's something I would have associated with like later Resident Evil games, especially like 3. I forgot that completely this was in the original game, and that was quite a lot of cool variety to use with that. So I really enjoyed the grenade launcher. But the Magnum's cool too.
So
When you were using it at the end, weren't you? Because
yeah.
you basically ran out of everything else. So that's all you took with you for the final boss. And as you were running out, you're just one-shotting all the zombies with Magnum.
Yeah, well, I said
headshots.
to you at
That
some
was
point,
awesome.
I played a lot of Resident Evil games now, and I keep like sort of hoarding the Magnum to the point that I never
I
use
do
it
every time as well.
And I was like,
Yeah.
no, I'm using it this time, and yeah, it was just fun. It's like
Yeah.
one shot in zombies and then just running off like a baller. That's what
Yeah.
the last question I've got for you is, what's the difference to the ending? So I remember the Barry ending because Wesker's like, oh, I've got his children and his family that I'm going to kill if he doesn't do what I say. What did they do with Rebecca?
He just has a go at Wesker, and then he shoots her. I think.
Okay.
Yeah, he does. She survives, but he shoots her. I think. And then she sort of comes back later on. She's like, "Hey, Chris." I guess maybe that's the point where she potentially dies if you didn't do the whatever, or is that a hunter bit? I can't remember now. But yeah, she's just there with the end with him, and then you go rescue Jill, and it's basically the same thing, apart from the fact that as you're getting onto the helicopter, the tyrant bursts through the floor of the helipad, and then you have to fight him again. But again, he's not that difficult. You shoot him a few times with a Magnum, and then somebody drops a rocket launcher for you, and you shoot him clean in half. Good fun though.
Yeah. Alex, have you any other thoughts that you don't think we've covered over the course of this podcast? Because I realise we are chugging on now in terms of time.
Yeah, I think you've done a great job there. I think we've covered it inside and out.
I think this overall sort of closing thoughts for me, really good game that I enjoyed more than I thought I would.
Yeah.
It is shown its age in some ways, but is certainly still playable in many ways, more playable than I expected it to be. Good game.
Totally. And I just implore everybody out there to try the DS version if you can get hold of it, because it's revelatory. It's fantastic.
What's the box art like? Or did you get a download?
I'll go get it. Hang on.
So this is a little sneak peek if you're going to watch the video version of this podcast. I want to see what this looks like. Very interested to check this out.
Amazing.
Oh no,
It's got your old mate on it.
oh that's not bad. That's okay. I think that's better than the
the
PS1.
Tyrant.
I really don't like that PS1 box art. Really not a fan.
No, that's pretty bad.
Deadly Silence.
You could also do wireless co-op and versus with up to 4 players on this, but obviously I can't do that now.
Well, if I get myself a 3DS, we can.
Oh my god, if they've still got the servers up for it, that'd be amazing.
It won't just do local, will it? Like it does.
Oh yeah, it probably does actually. What am I talking about? Wireless DS multi-card play. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, yeah.
Yes. It might happen. It might happen. But I suppose that brings us to the end of another classic episode of the Winners You podcast. If you like what you heard, and even if you didn't, why not give our numbers a bump by subscribing to our podcast feed of your choice? And if you prefer your podcast in a visual format, you can head over to our YouTube channel and search for a Winners You podcast, where you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. If the podcast isn't enough for your dose of a Winner Is You chattery, you can also follow us on the website, formerly known as Twitter, at Winner Is You Pod, and you can even send us an email to tell us how wrong we are about our gaming opinions by writing to winnersyupod@gmail.com. Alex and I also have accounts on used to be Twitter, at David Smiley and at SuperThulix respectively. Any housekeeping, Alex, before we get out of here? What are you doing for your next?
No, it's not changed since the last one.
Oh, is it not?
So it's still party games. We haven't done that. We've recorded that tomorrow as of time of recording this. So
I don't think you had picked your party games last time we recorded.
Still haven't yet.
You haven't?
I'm still not sure. Probably going to be a Mario Kart, but it feels like it's not the right kind of party game. I don't know. I don't know if I care anymore.
He's a broken man.
I don't think there are many good party games that are actual party games, unless it's like Mount Your Friends or something. I don't know.
Mount Your Friends is a good one. Yeah, that's a great one.
Isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Cost me like £1.20 that game.
It cost me nothing because it's on my Steam now because you have it.
Well, there we go.
And on that bombshell, I've been David, he has been Alex, and we have been The Winners You. And I'm out.
Keep gaming.